All right. Hello there, juniors. Today we are going to be talking about the time period after World War One and before World War Two. So sort of this 20-year gap in between. Um, and we're gonna take a look at that time period and basically see how World War One sets the stage for everything that's to come here. So, getting started. After World War One, pretty much every major European country is bankrupt. The only countries in the world who are better off financially than they were before World War One in the world are the United States and Japan. Both of them come out better, but everyone else comes out worse. Now, Europe's domination of world affairs as a result is tanked. So they're busy trying to fix their economies. U.S. and Japan are in a position now to jump off, right? And so Europe's last absolute rulers have been overthrown, right? These are the Russians, the Germans, the Austria-Hungarians. They're all done, right? So some democratic countries have a lot of political parties, which makes it difficult to govern them effectively. Because if you don't have a majority in government, laws can't be passed, right? So if you have 12 different parties in a country or 4 different parties in a country and nobody gets a majority, they can't get anything done. So people have to these countries have to form coalition governments, which is sort of a temporary alliance between different political parties. They don't usually last very long. And what you see then is some pretty frequent changes in government, which is going to make it hard to develop strong leadership or accomplish long-term goals in a lot of those countries. So Europe, particularly those countries that had lost those monarchs, are now being forced to use democracy, and it's not going well for them. But not only that, in Germany, you have something called the Weimar Republic. So the democratic German government is established in 1919, but it has some pretty major weaknesses, right? Germany's lack of strong democratic tradition. So Germans are not used to voting at this point in time. Germans are used to having a king or Kaiser. There are lots of different political parties, so no one can get in charge. And Germany and the Weimar Republic is being blamed by the Germans for the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. And if you'll remember, the Treaty of Versailles has Germany pay the entire war. This is called the War Guilt Clause. And also it cuts off a bunch of land from Germany and gives some of it to France, gives some of it to the Czech Republic, creates a country called Austria, right? A whole bunch of different things, right? And because Germany is paying that war guilt clause, right? The way that they're paying these massive debts, because Germany isn't just paying for their war, they're paying for England's war and France's war, right? The Germans are being forced to pay the bill for the entirety of World War One. And as a result, inflation is running away. So if you take a look in the top left, you can see these two pictures. The picture on the right, you see some German children. That's stacks of money. They are playing blocks with stacks of money. Money is so useless, so worthless in Germany that the children are using it as stacks of blocks. If you look in the left, that woman is heating her home with German Deutschmarks. And if you don't believe me, we talked, I think, a little bit about this last year, but the inflation rate in Germany goes up something like to a factor of 4 trillion to 1. It gets so bad that they take the 5 German mark bill, so the $5 bill, and print 50 million on it and put them back into circulation. So instead of raising taxes to pay for the war, Germany prints more money. And in 1918, bread cost less than 1 mark, but by 1923, so 5 years later, it costs over 200 billion marks. So imagine the richest person in the United States right now, Jeff Bezos. If this were 1918, and bread were to cost less than $1, right? And bread costs more than that, but let's say it doesn't. Let's say it costs $1. Bread costs less than $1. Jeff Bezos in 5 years would not even be able to buy a single loaf of bread, given the inflation rate. 1924, the Dawes Plan provides a $2.5 billion loan from the United States to try to stabilize Germany's economy, but it doesn't work, right? By 1929, German factories are producing as much as they had before the war, but right, if you the 2.6 billion in loans. If you look down here to the left, goes to Germany. Germany's paying $2 billion in reparations. The Allies are paying money back to the United States. It is a cycle, right? Now, what are some of these warning signs? During the 1920s, the U.S. economy appears to be booming, but it has some flaws. You have this an uneven distribution of wealth. So the wealthiest 5% had 33% of the income, and we're gearing up now towards the Great Depression, as you know, right? Many folks are too poor to buy a lot of the goods that are being produced, and you have overproduction because a lot of goods aren't being sold. Factories start laying workers off. Fewer people can buy those goods. This leads to this downward spiral. And not only that, but farmers are also overproducing with all these new scientific methods and machinery. And so there's also rising world competition. So they can't pay off their loans, and this weakens banks. And you have the collapse of 1929. But this is world history, right? And we already know Black Tuesday is October 29th, 1929, when the market crashes and everything falls to pieces. But this is not just a local thing that happens in the United States. This takes place other places as well. So the Great Depression kicks in the United States, but it very quickly expands to the rest of the world. Stocks are worthless. Lots of people are living in poverty. Unemployment's up. Wages are down. Thousands of businesses have failed. Banks have closed. 9 million people have lost their savings because the banks have no money to pay them back. Lots of farmers are losing their land because they can't pay their mortgage. By 1933, 25% of American workers are out of work. 1 in 4 American workers. So that's 25% unemployment. And this prolonged business slump is called the Great Depression. American banks start demanding repayment of their overseas loans, right? They start trying to pull their money back from these places in Europe, right? So this is how it spreads. Congress places high tariffs on imported goods, so people in other countries who are buying American goods have to pay extra. These other countries are doing the same thing, though. So now world trade drops off the face of the world. It's down 65%, right? And this sets off a worldwide depression, which is felt especially hard in Germany and Austria, but they are already suffering at this point, right? They're already in the throes of what might be termed the Great Depression because of war debts and dependence on American loans. So how do people try to solve this? Britain raises their tariffs, raises their taxes, they're regulating their currency, and they're dumping interest rates to promote industrial growth. This is a slow but steady recovery, right? This works. France moderates, the moderates and the socialists and the communists all together form a coalition to protect against rising anti-democratic forces, and they pass reforms which are offset by price. So unemployment remains, but democracy is preserved. And essentially, what they're doing there is there are not the Nazis are not just trying to take over in Germany, right? There are fascist parties everywhere, and in order to keep the fascists from taking over in France, the moderates, the socialists, and the communists form a coalition, right? They all band together to stop the Nazis from taking over the French government. You have in the United States, Franklin Roosevelt becomes president. He begins the New Deal. So he has these massive works projects. They're providing jobs. There are new government agencies that are giving financial assistance, right? They put together, this is where Social Security comes from. There's a lot of money spent on relief programs. And then you have regulations passed to reform the stock market, the banking system. This is successful. But the Great Depression does not end until World War II. So let's talk about those countries that didn't band together to beat out fascism. Fascism is a militant political movement that denies individual rights. It emphasizes loyalty to the state and obedience to the dictatorial leader. You have a one party. It's a single party's rule. And so individual rights, you don't get them. You're loyal to the state and you obey. And it's one party. So it believes that nations have to struggle, that peaceful nations get conquered. So otherwise, there's not necessarily a clear fascist theory. Past examples could be Germany and Italy and Spain. it's similar to a communism in a lot of ways. One, because it's ruled by dictators who do not allow other political parties. Two, they are in the process of denying individual rights. Three, the state is supreme, right? The government is in charge. And then four, they use censorship, they use indoctrination, and they use secret police. So a lot of people would put fascism on the very, very far right, and a lot of people will put Soviet communism on the very, very far left. But in reality, these two things function very similarly to each other. And the real difference is the communists will say, well, the state is controlling everything in the name of the people, and the fascists will say the state is controlling everything in the name of the state. But it's mostly made up of upper and middle classes and war veterans in these countries. So let's talk about Italy. Benito Mussolini. Fascism's rise there is fueled by bitter disappointment over the lack of territorial gains after World War I. Italy jumped in on the winning side and expected to get something for it, and they didn't. You have a rising unemployment, rising inflation, and the democratic government's ability is unable to take action. Right. So what happens? Benito Mussolini, he was a newspaper editor and a politician. He promises to revive the economy and rebuild the armed forces and provide a strong leadership, right? He basically says, hey, everything's broken. I can fix it. Trust me. So as economic conditions plummet, right, his popularity goes up, right? Here's this guy. He says he can fix it. Fascists attack communists and socialists on the streets. And in October of 1922, he marches on Rome and demands that the king put him in charge of the government. The king does, right? 30,000 fascists march with him. And he's known as Il Duce, or the leader. And he would never have total control like Hitler and Stalin do. But he does end up taking over in Italy. So Germany and the rise of Adolf Hitler. Hitler has modest beginnings before before serving in World War I, right? In 1919, he joins, after the war, the Nazis, right? Which Nazism is the German brand of fascism, right? They believe the Treaty of Versailles should have been overturned and that Germany had lost land, right? That there was that war guilt clause, so that Germany is paying all this stuff. They say this is bad. So they don't like the Treaty of Versailles, where Germany has to pay for the war. Two, they think that communism needs to be stopped, and Hitler adopts the swastika as the Nazi symbol, and he becomes the leader of the Nazis. And he leads an attempt to seize power in Munich, which is in Germany, right? And it fails, right? And he ends up going to jail for 9 months over this. While he is in jail, he writes the book Mein Kampf, which is my struggle or my fight, and it outlines his beliefs. And he basically lays it all out, right? The Germans, he's calling them the Aryans. They are the master race. So he has a racial element and a racial component to his fascism. Non-Aryans, like Jews and Gypsies, or etc., are inferior according to his ideology. And the Treaty of Versailles was an outrage, right? And he vows to regain those lost lands and to put Germany back where it belongs, right? Germans need more living space. And to get it, they're going to conquer Eastern Europe and Russia, right? They're going to take over those other areas so that German people have more room to live and room to grow. After prison, he rejoins the Nazis, and his influence rises drastically once the Great Depression hits everywhere else, too. So now the Germans are not just struggling paying these massive war debts. Now the Great Depression has hit, too, and in combination, Hitler is in a position to really jump in and pull off taking over Germany here. Now, so the German president names Hitler chancellor. So he comes into his power legally. Hitler calls for new elections. He gives the Nazis control of parliament, and Germany becomes a totalitarian state. All other political parties are banned. Hitler becomes known as der Führer, or the leader. Military production goes up. So he starts ignoring the Treaty of Versailles by raising military production. They create jobs. This improves the economy. He establishes a secret police, or the Gestapo. He uses widespread propaganda. Books that go against Nazi teachings get burned. Boys are forced to join the Hitler Youth. Girls are forced to join the League of German Girls. And churches are forbidden to criticize the Nazis, right? So he basically takes over and shuts down any sort of talk that anyone could have against the German state, the new Nazi state. and then Hitler starts going after uh, the people he has termed to be racially inferior, right? The Jewish population, which makes up less than 1% of Germany, but the Nazis have blamed them for all of Germany's problems, right? So there's this huge wave of anti-Semitism, which is prejudice against Jewish people. He passes laws that take away their rights. And then on November 19th in 1938 is Kristallnacht, which is Night of Broken Glass or the Night of Crystal, where Nazi mobs attack Jews in their homes. They destroy Jewish businesses and synagogues, and they basically burn down and destroy all the infrastructure that Jewish folks had built up in Germany. So what's going on in other countries? Now, democracy is only surviving in countries that have a strong democratic tradition, aside from Czechoslovakia, which is the only country in Eastern Europe to remain a democracy. Many countries, right? A lot of these countries who are at the end of World War I saying, who are said, okay, you're a democracy now. Go ahead, deal with it. A lot of those countries are falling to pieces, right? And they're being taken over by these dictators, by these strong men. And so what we're going to talk about next, we'll talk about aggressors and appeasers next week as we talk about the build-up toward World War II. But for right now, that should cover it for us. Yeah. So hope to see you all during my office hours. Shoot me an email if you have any questions. Yeah, and enjoy the week. Get outside.